Hello, hello. Ooh. Holy my fan. Yes, thank you very much. Asasara initsartu sirittaasuat, asasara Islandi presidentia, asasakkaqanikkat nunanittamalaanersut, asasakkanayutusitamassi. Tikilluangaaritsi Arctic Circle-imut atatillugu isumassioqatiinnissamut. Unapisussaq tassaavoq Arctic Circle-imut atatillugu Inuit issittup ineriartortinneqarnissaanut soqutiginnittut katersertinneqarnerat. Siorna isumassioqatigiinnerit Singaporemi aamma Alaskami ingallanneqarput. Inuit issittumi soqutigisaat sammillugin isumassioqatigiinissamut katersertittineq maanna kalaallit nunaannut pisussaangorpu. Inuit 342 nunanit assiingitsunit nunani assiingitsunit 17 isumassioqatigiinissamut peqatayumallutik nalunarsimapput. Tamanna pilluarit. Kære Thingforseti, kære forseti Íslands, kære gestir. Velkommen á Arctic Circle Forum. Þetta í þriðja skipti sem Arctic Circle Forum skapar fólki með áhuga á þróuninni á norðurslóðum tækifæri til að hittast og skiptast á skoðunum og hugmyndum. Fyrst í Singapore, því næst í Alaska og núna röðin komin að Grænlandi. 342 sérfræðingar, stjórnmálamenn, fræðimenn og fólk úr viðskiptalífinu frá alls 17 löndum skráð á ráðstefnunni hér í Nuuk og því ljóst að framundan áhugaverðir og spennandi dagar. Dear President of the Parliament of Greenland, President of Iceland, elected officials, dear guests. Welcome to the Arctic Circle Forum. This is the third time the Arctic Circle Forum provides people interested in the development of the Arctic with an opportunity to exchange views and ideas. The first forum was held in Singapore, the second one in Alaska, and now it's Greenland's turn. 342 participants, politicians, businessmen, academics from a total of 17 countries are gathered here in Nuuk to discuss topics that concern the people who live in the Arctic region, and I'm proud to be a part of it. My name is Ingadóra Guðmundsdóttir Markussen, and I am the Secretary General of the West Nordic Council, which is the parliamentary cooperation between Faroe Island, Greenland, and Iceland. I have been given the honor to be the conference moderator in this forum, and just let me begin by giving you some practical information. The forum will mostly be held in English, with a few speeches in Greenlandic. For interpretation, please take a hold of the headphones over here, and please, when you leave the room, put it back in place. There are two channels, Channel 1 and Channel 2. It's Greenlandic and in English. The organizers of this forum, the Government of Greenland and the Arctic Circle Secretariat, has set up an extensive and ambitious program for us the next couple of days. First here in Katuaq, Greenland Culturehouse, which we are now, and on Thursday afternoon at Inuit, the University of Greenland. We have some exciting days ahead of us. But before we begin, let us get to know Greenland better.
Greenland is situated in the Northern Hemisphere, close to the North Pole. It is, in fact, the world's largest island, 85% of which is covered by inland ice. As you're most likely aware, in recent years, our inland ice has been melting, a regularly mentioned factor whenever global warming is discussed. Greenland's 56,000 inhabitants live scattered along its coastal areas in a vast country with large distances between its inhabited settlements and towns, without connecting roads between them. As an Arctic climate, this places great demands on its infrastructure. Greenland is, however, no longer isolated from the rest of the modern world. Its telecommunication structure is well developed, with 98% of the population now having access to television, radio, telephone, and the internet. Most of the people live in the country's 17 towns, whilst the remainder are dispersed across 57 settlements in 4 municipalities. The standard of living and a social safety net are in several respects on a par with Scandinavia. Children and young people are entitled to 10 years of free education in state-run schools. And there are now modern educational institutions in the Greenland of today, as well as institutions conducting research in Greenland's many biological resources, digital solutions in an Arctic climate, and how Greenland can sustainably utilize its rich subsoil. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, though today it has self-government, and is a democratic society with its own parliament, initiating specific laws which apply to Greenland. The government of Greenland has launched a modernization of its business possibilities, which, although dominated by fishing and hunting, aims to create new businesses in tourism, raw materials, and industry. The government is, for example, investing heavily in expanding the country's infrastructure. And Greenland's parliament has just decided to invest in a new airport structure, so that the capital Nuuk, as well as UNESCO's World Heritage Site of Ilulissat, will now both have a 2,200-meter airport runway established, enabling them to support direct air services from both the United States and Europe, thereby doubling the number of tourists arriving by plane toward 2040. Likewise, by building better harbour facilities and reducing taxes and fees, Greenland can also come to benefit from an increase in the number of cruise tourists. Greenland has huge water reserves stored in its inland ice, and the government aims to invite private companies to invest in the export of drinking water to the world market in the coming years. There's also a very significant hydropower potential in Greenland. In fact, more than 70% of its electricity consumption is already covered by hydropower. It has also charted a very significant untapped hydropower potential which can be exploited for industrial projects, such as the production of aluminium, minerals, etc. Moreover, Greenland's rich biodiversity is of considerable scientific value. In particular, Greenlandic microorganisms, and this offers great commercial potential. Interesting organisms have already been found in Greenland, and the possibility of finding new commercially viable organisms and enzymes is still very present. Greenland is also in the process of developing into a mining country with a substantial investment in new mines. In 2016, a world-class ruby and sapphire mine has been established south of the capital Nuuk, which will now export 20 million gemstones a year. And in the coming year, even further new mining projects, such as the lead-zinc mine in northeast Greenland, as well as the mine established in one of the world's largest deposits of rare earth metals and uranium at Kvanefjell in southwest Greenland. Our aim is that our past 10 years of successful collaboration with foreign investors primarily within the mining industry, should be extended in collaboration within infrastructure, ice and water, tourism, and much, much more. So, welcome to Greenland.
Thank you. And to introduce the opening session, it is an honor for me to present Minister for Labour, Industry, Trade and Foreign Affairs, Mr. Vittus Qujaukitsoq.
Ladies and gentlemen, ministers and excellencies, I'm honored to welcome you to the Arctic Circle Greenland Forum. The focus of this Arctic Circle Forum will be economic development for the peoples of the Arctic. I look forward to hearing all the interesting discussions and see the results. It is a great honor and pleasure to introduce you the speakers in the opening session. His Excellency Premier of Greenland, Mr. Kim Kielsen, His Excellency President of Iceland, Mr. Ólafur Ragnar Grímsson, the Honorable Chair of Inuit Circumpolar Conference, Ms. Okalik Eegeesiak. I wish you all pleasant stay in Greenland and a fruitful participation in the Arctic Circle Greenland Forum. I will give the floor to the Premier of Greenland, Mr. Kim Kielsen. Mr. Kielsen is born in 1966. He is educated as a sailor and a policeman. He was elected to the Parliament of Greenland in 2005. He has been Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Mineral Resources from 2007 to 2009. He was acting as a Premier in September 2014 and was elected as a Premier since December 2014. Please give hands for Mr. Kielsen.
Gracias, Ólafur. Asasakka ministerit ataqqinertut arnat angutillu. Nuunnautiiqaa Arctic Circle kalaallunaani uqallinnermut Islanti presidentia Ólafur Ragnar Grímsson peratialu kalaallunaannut tikilluoqusinnaayassi Arctic Circle aatsaat siullerpaami kalaallunaani piussangorpuq isumalluarpuullu suliassinnut misililtakkasi issittumut tungasut pilluit paastissiisinnaagасsi tamangalu peqataajartorassi qimaallannarpoq aallartitat malunaatillat issittu pilaanneersut Amerikka avannarlermeersut Europameersut Aasiamiillu najuuttut takusinnaalliit taama amerlatialisi аллерлуси наюккиарторнерси эққааситсаатаа исситтоқ қанеқ нунарсуурми пингааутеқартигинерсоқ таматта илисимаорпут нунарсуумеқатиитсинни исситтумут соқутигинниннеқ укиун кингуллерни аннертусиартуиннависсоқ таассумалу кингунераа нунат нунарсуумеқатигинни сиуттуусут исситторпиллу периуссаник сулеқатигинниссаниллу инерисаалернерат аммут Arctic Circle kalaallunaanni uqallinneq Nunatsinnet issittumilu najuqartuusunut najuariatinnut ineriartortinormut eqeersimaartumik peqataarusseqarta uqalliseqataarusunnitsinnut takussutissаниллу periarfissiuq ukiuni kingillerni pingasuni Arctic Circle nunarsuumeeratigiinni taatimersuartarnerni issittumi sumiiffimmi ineriartortitinermi unammillernertut periarfissallu pilluit uqallinnermi anginerpaanut ilaalersimuuq nunarsuumeeratigit issittup siunissaa pilluu kalaallinnunaata Arctic Circle suliaqarnerani peqataanissaannut qilanaarpunga nunarsuumeeratigit nunap inoqqaavisa pisinnaataaffiinut pingaartumik ineriartortitinnissamuk pisinnaataaffiisa eqqummaarifiinissaannut paasisima saqalernissaannullu qulakkerinninniarta sulinerput pingaarutilik attatiinnassorupput tamanna pilluu uqallinnissami qulequtarinerartoq issittumi innuttaasut aningaasatigut ineriartornerat issittumi nunap inoqqaavi amerlasuut kalaallunaannut ассигусууппут унаммиллигассат периарфиссаллу эққарсаатигалиит таамааттумик уутсиннут пингаарутеқарпоқ оқаллиннерми нунап иноққаави ақутсисуусут оқаасеқартинниссаат Arctic Circle kalaallunaani оқаллиннермик қулеқутақаринеқарсимасоқ аққутигалу такутиккусуппарпут нунат иноққаави намминеқ нунагисаминни имминут инериартортинниссамут сеператиллу илисимариинниттуусут наалаккерсуисооqatigit исимақатигиститсинни пингаартитатсинник сисаманик сукарсуақарпуут тасса аалисарнеқ ааттассарсиорнеқ такангояқарнеқ сулиффиссуақарнерлу исимақарпууллу таакку инериатортитинэрмут пингаарутеқартуусут аалисарнеқ анигаасарсиутитта пингаарнерсараат укиунилу амерласууни таамааттуааннассаақ иниуяратигиттулли инуниутиссатут атаасииннақ исималлуутигиуннаарлуу иниунуитаасиннаасут аллат уяртортуассуугут калаалнунаани таконгояқарниккут инериартортинissaq периарфисақарлуорпоқ таконгояартитсинерли питсаасумик ангусақарфиуссаппат нунатсиннут тикиссиннаанеқ писарилсартариақарпоқ таамааттумик сулиниутит ангалланнэрмут аттуумассиллит ассиингитсут ааллартисарпугут тааккулу илагаат миттарфинник нутааник санаарторниссақ миттарфинниллу пиориерсуник аллилиинеқ сулиниутит тамакку укиуна аггерсуни аннертуумик анигаасалииффигисариақарпут сиинертаинеқарпумми иннутаасик акигиннерусумик питсаанерусумиллу ангалланниккут периарфиссақалиссасут аамма таконгояқарниккут инуустиссарсиутеқарниккуллу питсаанерусумик атугассақарлу иллиссасоқ ааттассарсиорниккут инериарторнеқ сулиффисаартитсинерлу агуниарпарпут тааккулу тоққааннартумик тоққааннангкалуамиллу иниуяқатигиннут нунатсиннуллу исертитсутаассаммата агуниаккатта агуниарнеранни нунатсинни намминерсортут нуналлу аллани анингаасалисиннаасут писариақартиппугут оқаллиннэрми исситтуми иннуттаасут сиуарсарниссаа пиллуу сумииффини ассиингитсуни атаавартумик инериартортиссар симанерит пиллуит қилеқуттат ассиингитсут тикиннеқартассаппут илаатиут маккуусут сиуллеқ сумииффинни иннуттаасуни акуутитсилуурниссақ таавал нунап иноққаависа оқартуссаақатаанаулерниссаат ааппааттут писуussуtit уумассуллит ниуаутигинсиннаа сааллу пингаюут исситтуми нивернеру сиунissaa таавал анигаасалииниссамут периарфиссат сисамаат пеққиннерусумик инуунеқалерниссақ таавал таллимаат исситтоқ аватаанит исигалуу апеққутит пингаарутеқақисут эққарторнеқарниссааса инернеруумагассаат қиланаарлунга тусарнаассаукка нериутигааралу киунеқарлуартумик илуатсиллуартумиллу оқаллиффик ингерланнеқарумаартоқ нериуппунга нунатсинниинерси нуаннерсумик мисигисақарфиумаарисси нунатсиннут ууммаммик писумик тигиллуаққигитси қуянақ thank you
We thank Mr. Kielsen. It is my honor to present the next speaker, the President of Iceland. Mr. Ólafur Ragnar Grímsson was born in 1943. He has a degree in economics and political science. He received his PhD in 1970 as the very first Icelander. He was elected to the Iceland Parliament in 1978 until 1983 and was re-elected from 1991 to 96. He served as a Minister of Finance from 1988 to 1991. He has been chairman of the People's Alliance in the period between 1980 to 1995. He was elected as a president for the first time in 1996 and has served in this capacity for 5 terms. Please welcome Mr. Grímsson.
Premier of Greenland, representatives of states and governments, leaders of indigenous organizations, participants from business, science, research, and environmental organizations, dear friends. The opening of the Arctic Circle Greenland Forum with more than 350 participants from almost 20 countries confirms that since its foundation a few years ago, the Arctic Circle has become the most wide-ranging network of Arctic dialogue and cooperation. Together with the large annual assemblies in Iceland, the first 2 forums in Alaska and Singapore, the Greenland Forum here in Nuuk presents our vision and determination to bring to the people of the Arctic a brighter future, while sharing with others the global responsibility for the sustainability of the Arctic and our planet. I sincerely thank the government of Greenland for its constructive and enthusiastic partnership in the organization of this forum, for its insight into which issues and challenges should acquire priority on our agenda, how the program here in Nuuk should reflect the most promising areas of economic progress, as well as important frameworks for the empowerment of the people and the fulfillment of their hopes. It has been my privilege as President to witness the democratic advancement of Greenland, and our cooperation in the preparation of this Arctic Circle Forum here in Nuuk has confirmed my conviction that together we have indeed entered a new era. Greenland, which, like my own country, Iceland, was for centuries remote from the leading countries and continents, is now center stage in the global vision of how the Arctic must play a crucial role in the future of our planet. When the Arctic Council was established following the end of the Cold War, tension and military confrontation were replaced by a journey in cooperation. Previously, hostile countries came together at the same table, determined to map out step by step how constructive dialogue, research, and cooperation could guide the future of the Arctic. The indigenous people and their organizations required an important role in this process. And in this, Greenland and its leaders provided inspiring influence. And as we progressed into the 21st century, the need for a wider, more informal, completely open and democratic platform where everyone could join in the discussion, presenting their projects and ideas, became clear to many. And thus we came together 3 years ago to establish the Arctic Circle with a mission to strengthen the role of the people, but also to support the Arctic Council and all the authorities responsible for Arctic affairs. The growing involvement of countries outside the Arctic, leading states in Europe and Asia, as well as their institutions and enterprises, was also a key component in the creation of the Arctic Circle. And the annual assemblies every October have confirmed the wisdom of this arrangement. In the first 3 years, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, China, Japan, Korea, Singapore, and many others have actively participated in the assemblies, presenting their contributions and projects in both plenary and specialized sessions. This global dimension of the Arctic Circle was also evident in the forum in Alaska in August of last year, and even more so in the forum in Singapore in November. And now here in Nuuk, we are also witnessing this Asian and European presence, a global engagement in addition to the participation by the Arctic states. It is, I think, also highly significant that the Greenland Forum welcomes strong delegations from the neighboring countries to the east and to the west of Greenland, because within the geographical Arctic structure, Canada, Greenland, and Iceland form a logical neighborhood within which economic and social progress can be furthered by close cooperation. These three countries are close enough geographically to make cooperation in many fields, both practical and advantageous. And as Greenland works to advance in the areas outlined just now in the speech by Premier Kim Kielsen, the involvement of partners from the two neighboring countries, Canada and Iceland, can lead to successful results. The logistics of air traffic, sea transport, tourism, infrastructure connections, and also the experience in the sustainable use of natural resources all make the vision of such tripartite cooperation among these Arctic neighbors both practical and positive. And I therefore welcome here today warmly the strong participation by Canada, the delegation which the Premier of Quebec and his administration, as well as other regions of Canada, have sent to this forum. And I thank them for their engagement. I am also very pleased to see from my own country, Iceland, so many participants, business leaders, officials, heads of universities, experts, entrepreneurs, and others. But I also want to acknowledge here today the presence of distinguished participants from the United States, who once again have demonstrated their commitment to the successful future of the Arctic by joining forces with us here in Nuuk. But this forum is, however, primarily dedicated to the people of Greenland. It's a testimony to the important role of Greenland and how constructive Arctic and global cooperation can strengthen the prosperity and the welfare of the people of this country, how the advance of Greenland can serve as a model for other Arctic regions, as well as also other parts of the world on faraway continents where indigenous inhabitants claim the right to determine their own future. Greenland is, as we know, half the size of Western Europe, the largest territory in the Arctic, where the people have acquired constitutional self-government and can thus, to a large extent, determine their own future. And by hosting the Arctic Circle Forum here in Nuuk, the government of Greenland sends an important signal to us all, issuing a broad invitation to constructive engagement in the spirit of our mutual interest in the success of the Arctic and its people. And the Arctic Circle is indeed honored to be a part of this journey, to join Greenland in hosting this forum, which is, in fact, the largest international gathering on the Arctic ever to take place in Greenland. The forum can, in many ways, become the foundation of further progress. And within the Arctic Circle, there is a willingness to continue this cooperation and plan, if found acceptable, regular Arctic Circle Greenland forums, which would perhaps take place every second or third year here in Greenland, and would thus, together with the annual assemblies in Iceland and forums in other countries, strengthen our shared global platform. The program here in Nuuk reflects, as we know, new direction in the areas of economic progress, investment, and finance. Instead of emphasizing, as was the practice in previous years, a few large industrial projects, mining and fossil fuel production, our attention here at the forum will be on gradual progress in the evolution of air transport and cargo shipping, modern tourism based on the growing global interest in the unique nature of the North, the utilization of ocean resources and other areas of economic progress which can be developed on the basis of existing opportunities, directed by the policy to empower the inhabitants and serve their economic and social interest. We will also examine how new Arctic financial structures with international involvement will further investment and help to coordinate infrastructure projects across the Arctic in order to establish what we could call a viable pan-Arctic infrastructure system. In this respect, the coordinated vision and involvement of Canadian, Greenlandic, and Icelandic partners in cooperation with others is especially relevant, given our geographic locations and shared interests and experiences. And this geographic tripartite dimension will, of course, as I said before, be strengthened by the active involvement of partners from Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world. And therefore, it is highly significant that during this forum, we will in one session benefit from the perspective of distinguished European and Asian participants who will share with us their vision of a successful Arctic future. But let us remember that the development of the Arctic regions is, however, not only about economic progress. Education and health are also crucial components in the lives of the people, their well-being and the education of new generations. And these crucial dimensions will be discussed both here in the Culturehouse and also when we move on the last day to the University of Greenland, where research and innovation and the role of Arctic universities will be on the agenda. And I also want to thank the University of Greenland for its very constructive contribution to this forum, and hope that together we can indeed build a dynamic and forward-looking educational network across the Arctic, giving the young generation the conviction that they can indeed enjoy a shared future rooted in their home regions, but strengthened by constructive global engagement. I hope, therefore, dear friends, we will all witness in the coming 3 days how the Arctic Circle Greenland Forum will serve to demonstrate an advanced engagement by the inhabitants of the Arctic, how they can, in cooperation with partners from other parts of the world, both near and far, seek paths in economic and social progress and strengthen their infrastructure and their communities, as well as enjoying a good education and health systems. The forum also consolidates the new dimension of the Arctic Circle to create, in addition to the large international assemblies every October in Iceland, platforms in different parts of the world, where specific aspects of Arctic future can be extensively discussed and new dimensions examined and explored. And in this way, the Greenland Forum is a certain milestone in the global engagement of the indigenous people of the Arctic. And it is both an honor and a privilege for the Arctic Circle family to join the government of Greenland in this important endeavor. We are indeed determined to build a strong foundation for our cooperation, but also a sustainable and successful future for the people across the Arctic. Acutely aware of the new global significance of this, the most northernmost part of our planet. And I hope you all feel inspired to be a part of this fascinating journey. And your presence here today is a testimony to our joint commitment to create a new Arctic epoch. And with these words, I welcome you again and wish all of us constructive and successful sessions in the coming days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Grímsson. The last speaker in the opening session is Ms. Okalik Eegeesiak. She was born in 1962 and has a past in various Inuit organizations in the Northwest Territories and later in Nunavut. She also has a past in the Inuit Broadcasting Corporation. She has been appointed as a board member for the Nunavut Wildlife Management Board in 2001 and has also served in the Nunavut Planning Commission from 2009 to 2012. She has been president of Inuit Dapilisat of Canada from 1998 to 2000. She has served as a president for the Ragnar Inuit Association from 2008 to 2014. She was elected as a chair for the Inuit Circumpolar Council in July 2014. Please give hands for Ms. Eegeesiak.
That's a long walk. Kurinimik, amalo kurinimik tungas titogama, inukatika halukaka, nunakakaksama yokativut, tabani kativudilak. Inuit Qujaukitsoq tamakkunungagala Greenland junga uvatinitau tusaqattaqaqaqati. Inuit itseqtormiut siuneqsui suuqatigiinni siuliqtaasuuvunga. Tukusnaqa. I'd like to thank the organizers of this important event for inviting ICC and Inuit to this beautiful venue, and Naalakiksuisut, the Greenland government, for their warm welcome. As chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, I represent 160,000 Inuit living in Canada, Greenland, Alaska, and Chicago. ICC is an international organization with official status within the United Nations and is one of 6 permanent participants in the Arctic Council. Inuit may be a small population in a global sense, but we have a mighty voice. The theme of the discussion over the next few days focuses on, once again, economic development for the peoples of the Arctic. And again, I suggest by the peoples of the Arctic. I remind you that Inuit, as articulated in the 2009 Circumpolar Inuit Declaration on Resource Development, support Arctic development, but not at all costs. Look around and let the beauty of this building, the city of Nuuk, and the ocean inspire us to move beyond the discussion of the challenges the Arctic and its peoples face. Discuss to the possibilities Arctic peoples can achieve by working with you. Scientists, industry leaders, conservation groups, and governments, those who believe in meaningful partnerships with Arctic peoples. Economic development can take many forms. It can be non-renewable and renewable resource development, shipping, tourism, subsistence and commercial use of Arctic wildlife, when we're allowed, arts and culture, environmental monitoring, infrastructure, and so on. I hope you leave this meeting with a new Arctic partner, whether you are a shipping or mining representative, a scientist, a member of a conservation group, or from an Arctic or other state government. See this Arctic partner, whether they are Inuit or Sami, Aleutian or Russian, Gwich'in or Athabascan, as a positive force in your work, not as a duty. Inuit believe in a vision for the Arctic. It is both a vision that looks backwards and forward, guided by our past to inform our future. Let us take the next few days to think about a 30-year vision for the Arctic, Arctic 2050, not just to the next budget cycle, and not just to the next quarterly report. Let's look long term. I want to share with you a few thoughts that I hope will stimulate the discussion over the next few days. I want to tell you about the challenges that rapid and unpredictable change is bringing to my home, to my Inuit Nunat. I would like to tell you about what Inuit are doing to secure our vision, and I would like you to think about how we can work together for our shared vision of the Arctic. Inuit have occupied the circumpolar Arctic for millennia, carving a pragmatic culture from the land and sea. We have lived, not survived, we have lived through famines, the Little Ice Age, Vikings, whalers, missionaries, registered schools, good business and not so good business, and consecutive governments. And we will continue to thrive in a changing Arctic. Inuit-based decisions on our indigenous knowledge of our past, of our present, for our future. A knowledge system based on thousands of years of observing, testing, and transmitting our knowledge to the next generation. Always embracing the opportunities. We see ourselves as proactive rather than reactive, and identify key investigations and studies for economic opportunities. We plan for development and growth, and analyze potential risks. We use the very best knowledge available to make evidence-based and informed decisions. As the previous speakers said, the Arctic is vast and the community is unique in nation states. Our visioning exercise is unique for different communities, and the opportunities and challenges associated with Arctic change vary significantly over time and place. Different communities face different risks and have different perspectives regarding the implications of those risks, as well as the most appropriate response options. Being partners in the planning, the research, and the governance of the Arctic ultimately leads to more sustainable, longer-term, positive impact decision-making in Arctic communities. The nation-states we live in all have implemented international law at different levels, from the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples to the Nagoya Protocol. Again, Inuit live in 4 countries with 4 very different political regimes and relationships with the state. Yet we are one through our language and our culture. There remain uncertainties. For example, the evolution of governance systems and the economic stability of the Arctic for the outside world depends on global demands for energy. The exploitation of Arctic resources are based more on commodity prices, not on the thickness of the ice. These emerging economic systems must be more flexible and especially more sustainable. The strength and level of cooperation among different institutions affect how well Inuit communities live with change. As I travel to bring the Inuit voice to the world, I am constantly met with great interest in the issues that the Arctic faces. The Arctic truly has the global consciousness spellbound. Those who want to use it, ship through it, explore it, mine it, study it, and protect it. While Inuit use it, we ship through it, we don't really explore it. We're starting to mine it. We've studied it longer than anybody else has, and we've protected it longer than anybody else has. Visioning the future of the Arctic can be useful for navigating the various needs of the peoples who call the Arctic home, others who share an interest in the Arctic, and those who see profit in the Arctic. As the world looks northward for resources, shipping, fisheries, and tourism, amongst other things, Inuit must be heard. We must be part of any decision-making in our Nunaat. We have established systems of governance. We welcome partnerships and relationships that support our rights to pursue our cultural heritage. In many situations, we are working in multilateral processes with well-funded governments, well-funded non-governmental organizations and businesses, and where many other non-Arctic interests are represented. Some have agendas that they want to have validated by having Inuit involved in their work. This takes resources. It is hard to speak about the Arctic without addressing the bowhead whale in the room, that being climate change. Inuit welcome the interest, the potential for jobs and trading, the economic opportunities. Economic opportunities under whose terms? Whose priorities? Whose profits? Whose win? Inuit economic opportunity, Inuit economic success are limitless. If and when we, in this room and in rooms such as this, when we also invest in more culturally appropriate education, when we invest in more mental health, when we invest in social programs and services, when we invest in infrastructure. Because for Inuit, our immediate priorities include addressing our high rates of suicide, our mental health services are underfunded and underserviced, our life expectancy statistics are well below southern standards, food insecurity is increasing, and housing is limited and often below standards. These are our priorities in parallel with working with you for economic development. Inuit established the Inuit Circumpolar Council and its satellite bodies to work with you. Not against you, not over you, and not despite of you. We want to work with you. So work with us. Let's go back to for Inuit, by Inuit, with Inuit. Kujnami.
Thank you very much. Now let's begin with the sessions, and I want to explain for the concept of that before I introduce the next moderator. It is that there will be some speeches up here. The panelists will sit down in the chair here in sofas, and there will be an opportunity, depending on how much time is left, that you can ask a question. Maybe we have time for one or two questions from the audience, but when you have one, please make it short and clear. Okay. And the next one on the stage here is the Minister for Finance and Mineral Resources, Ms. Randi Evaldsen.
Hello and welcome. My name is Randi Evaldsen and I'm Minister of Finance and Mineral Resources here in Greenland. Lots of good ideas, but how do we implement them? First of all, I would like to thank you for the host to give me the opportunity to speak at this international forum, the Arctic Circle. Thank you. Even though the theme of this workshop, generally speaking, is how we can foster economic development in the Arctic, I'm going to focus on how we can get the many ideas implemented In my opinion, this is where we face our greatest challenge. Naalakkersuisut, the government of Greenland, is about to launch a large-scale plan to boost economic growth in our community, one which ensures long-term financial sustainability. We call it the Sustainability of Growth Plan. In short, it's aimed to improving the framework condition for industry stakeholders so that we can promote growth in our local economy and thus create more jobs. It also aims to promote a strong economy which ensures plenty of financial latitude for our children and grandchildren to develop new political projects under beneficial conditions. This is not the first time that Naalakkersuisut has presented a plan with several initiatives to increase growth and remove barriers that prevent growth. Quite the opposite. If we line up all the economic reports made since introduction of Home Rule in 1979, they would supposedly stretch from the Okalik in south to Ragnar in north. This poses a problem because a few of the initiatives have been implemented to the desired extent. Others never got off the ground, and it's both a problem and a pity. These failures are ours alone, but we have every intention of making sure that we get it right this time. Because every time we miss our mark, we pay a price in lost opportunity. We cannot afford that. We are all small communities living in a huge land with impassable terrain far to north. From time to time, a string of unique opportunities to develop our society present themselves, but we often lack the means and resources to realize. Against this background, this is not a general question against the content of the reports. It is excellent that our challenges are described as well as how and in which way we can move forward in the form of large number of proposed initiatives. It is simplicity. The essential problem is it's often difficult to get such plans realized. A wise man once said, "Everybody wants development, no one wants change." Unfortunately, this statement contains a great deal of truth when it comes to Greenland. Because development implies a change of existing system, and this usually means that certain groups must surrender long-held privileges or benefits before the entire community can achieve an improvement. Naturally, it is not the case that all major reform packages by definition are good, nor is the case that all long-held privileges should be abolished. Indeed, they may be good reason for maintaining them. My point is that if we want to further develop our society, we need to continuously adjust our society in order to get the most out of the resources. What is interesting is that everyone agrees on the need of reform. Parliamentary discussion and newspaper editorials prove it time and again. Yet initiatives taken by the government of Greenland often face a hail of fire, resulting in either rejection or postponement. Why is this? In my opinion, there are many reasons. I will present you 3 of them. The first has to do with stake when a reform proposition first hit the parliamentary deck. When the government come up with a proposal that will benefit society as a whole, it usually involves a minority group being deprived of certain economic privileges. These groups are often successful at advocating and are just satisfied that they are unwillingly subjected to. Meanwhile, the minority group stays silent. They experience only a marginal improvement from a single initiative to distribute resources. Their incentive to oppose critique and the initiative to thus a reduced appetite to pick a fight with the minority group. Ultimately, this results in a media fuss appearing to be a national revolt when reality is quite the opposite. The second one, in a country like Greenland, which is a large and extensive with a small population size, and where there are also roads between the numerous towns and settlements, it is very easy to see who wins and loses every time a proposal is put forward. This makes it very difficult to make the necessary reforms, because there are no groups in society that, in principle, will accept a reduction of the benefits they feel they are entitled to receive. The third one, each time a reform is passed, we have been seen destined to replay the same sad story. The media bring case stories about the group of people that are affected, not on the gains that will be accrued to the entire society. Then organizations and politicians from the opposition follow up with criticism of the reform because it will impair the circumstances for many a group. Overall, an apparently large public opinion is orchestrated, and it hampers the ability to get the reform proposals implemented, or they get watered down so much that it's hard to call them a reform. Seriously, no interest group responsible for all public interest exists. Too bad, at least as seen from my chair as Naalakkersuisoq for Finance and Mineral Resources. These examples are not criticism of either the media, interest groups, or opposition politicians. They are just doing their jobs. They are, however, examples of the challenges we face in implementing major reforms of our society. Reforms that aim to strengthen our society in the near future. If these obstructive practices continue, we will end up in the situation that everyone warns against. Status quo is not an option. Greenland is a crossroad where in the coming years comprehensive and important decisions will need to be taken. If we want to maintain and raise our level of prosperity. Part of the reason is that development is taking place at an ever-increasing rate. In response, we have to continuously adjust our society if we want to share the future growth. In other words, there is a need for public debate on how we can create framework that allow us to promote reforms rather than obstruction. The people deserves it. We owe it, if not to ourselves, then to our coming generations who will live to see Greenland that we leave behind for them to inhabit. The Greenland will love and appreciate. This is our chance to make it work before reach a point of no return. That is all I want to say, and I look forward to developing my ideas in the ensuing discussion. Thank you.
Hi, sorry for the confusion earlier. I'm here to welcome the next speaker, Aili Keskitalo. She is president of the Sami Parliament of Norway. Thank you.
Ologitu, thank you. President of Greenland Parliament, President of Iceland, Premier of Greenland, ministers, indigenous leaders, your excellencies, brothers and sisters, dear friends of the Arctic. Allow me first to thank the organizer for allowing me as a representative of the Sami parliament in Norway, the Sami people's democratically elected governing body, this opportunity to address the Arctic Circle Greenland Forum. I am looking forward to some inspiring days here. I believe we have a lot to learn from each other as we exchange good ideas and discuss potential future solutions. I'm also so happy that the organizers has chosen to include indigenous peoples in the program to such an extent. I wish all Arctic development for us would do the same. We, the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, have at least one thing in common. And no, it is not knowing how to dress warmly. It is the fact that the basis of our lives and our cultures are very closely tied to renewable resources like fishing, hunting, and trapping. For the Sami, of course, this includes reindeer herding. A large part of our sense of identity and cultural self-understanding is related to how we make use of and bond with resources and landscapes. Let me first tell you about my homeland, Sápmi, which existed long before the nation-states were established and national borders were drawn between Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. Today, the Sami live as a minority because new settlements sprang up in traditional Sami areas. I would say that the historic backdrop is rather different for the Sami than it is for the Inuits and most other indigenous peoples in the Arctic. This has an impact on the type of relationship we have with our respective national authorities. In Norway, where I live, the Norwegian state's approach to dealing with the Sami takes place within the parameters of a unitary state. This constitutes an important foundation for developing and framing Sami policy in Norway, as opposed to the situation one finds in federal systems like Canada, or here, where the government of Greenland has gradually taken more and more economic and administrative responsibility from the state of Denmark. At this forum, we are talking about development. Development is not merely a question of economic growth. Development embraces the entire community and should facilitate financial, social, and political improvement so that all individuals can live good, meaningful lives with dignity. Innovation and growth do not take place in a vacuum. It is about fate control for our peoples. Diversity is a crucial factor. Where cultures meet, they generate creativity and entrepreneurship. I would maintain that future development and growth in the Arctic must ensure that there is more latitude for variations. Diversity should be curtailed, not be curtailed, but encouraged. That will ensure that we reap greatest benefits from our knowledge, capital, labor, and natural resources. Indigenous peoples have special international legal protection for the land and resource space. Such protection may provide a foundation for continuing and renewing established or traditional industries, as well for development of new businesses. For me, it is essential to work to ensure that the development of the Sami community takes place in accordance with the Sami people's own needs, values, and ranking of priorities. And Sami livelihoods or industries have traditionally been closely related to nature. These industries are based on control of and easy access to an abundance of resources and low investments for exploitation. A relatively high degree of self-employment in such as reindeer husbandry, fishing, arts and culture has a prominent position, often in combination with positions in the public sector or in publicly funded cultural institutions. To a large extent, this phenomenon can be understood as being a continuation of a hunting and trapping culture, historically an important distinguishing feature of the Sami culture. So, back to the relationship with the states we live in. Since the turn of the millennium, Norway's foreign policy has motivated a campaign of action in the High North. This campaign has breathed new life into the state's role as an industrial player. And at the same time, it has brought global market players to the north on a large scale. Geopolitical and industrial interests, in addition to climate change, are driving the direction of these policies. However, this represents some challenges. I told you earlier that we, the Sami people, do not enjoy the same level of self-determination, for example, as the Inuit in Greenland, when it comes to, as example, management of natural resources. Neither is there any effective models of benefit sharing with the Sami parliament or with local Sami communities when it comes to extraction of natural resources. If one were to expect that the Sami parliament, with broad support from the Sami public arena, would actively support cooperation on economic development with global market players, this would most likely require that the state of Norway, also play an active role in facilitating this. If the state does not play part as a facilitator, there is reason to believe that the Sami parliament and the Sami public would continue and very possibly expand our work to prevent and limit global players' exploitation of natural resources in Sami territories. It is a logical reaction. No acknowledgement of our rights drives a need for us to limit access. That is not the best platform for development. Progress towards a more dynamic, sustainable business and industry for the Sami community primarily calls for structural changes in how the Sami parliament and the state, or really how the Sami people and the states we live in, work together to accomplish this. We believe that the Sami people, through the Sami parliament, must be given the latitude and the opportunity to be a Sami industrial policy developer in cooperation with local communities. Having such a clear role as a player must also entail that the Sami parliament's budgets see a return on their emphasis on economic development. Today, there are no such mechanisms for increasing direct earnings as there are for local governments and county governments. If Sami culture is to develop further, we need business and industry that benefits the Sami community. To accomplish this, we must most likely develop our own innovation models for small-scale, community-based industry and cooperative models for large-scale industry. Both alternatives pose huge challenges in respect for the political system, with the Sami parliament as a key player. These are the thoughts that I initially wanted to share with you today. I thank you for your attention. Ologito.
Thank you, Aili. Now please help me welcome Nicole Campow. She speaks on behalf of Monica Ell-Kanayuk, Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, Government of Nunavut. Are you, yes.
Unnusakut. Kojan naming tabane khatagun nakama upikusipsiak tunga tamane khatagun namni tabane Nuuk me amalo tana pivale yulegenek okeop taktumeon isimagiluge ukhausajaune aktilugu. Unnusakut. Thank you for inviting me to your forum. I am delighted to be here in Nuuk and to participate in this panel discussion on the question of economic development for the peoples of the Arctic. The government of Nunavut is committed, working with our partners to improve the lives of our people and the territory's economy. We have set 4 priorities for our mandate: self-reliance and optimism through education and training, healthy families through strong and resilient communities, economic growth through responsible development across all sectors, and good government through wise use of our resources. These priorities support our vision for the future, which is to make Nunavut a place where Nunavut Miut are prosperous, well-educated, and self-reliant. We envision a place where we live comfortably in a modern world with traditional cultures and values as a guide, where we manage and develop our resources responsibly, and where development benefits our workforce and local business operators. We are working hard to achieve this vision, where we've had some success. Since the world economic downturn in 2008, Nunavut has experienced a strong economic growth. And even though our resources development sector has been affected by the community commodity collapse in the past year or so, positive growth is expected for 2016, continuing to 2017. For Nunavut Miut, this economic growth has supported rising prosperity. Since Nunavut's creation as a territory in 1999, the average personal income has nearly doubled, and the number of Nunavut Miut employed has risen steadily. Nonetheless, significant hurdles need to be overcome as we support and enable economic development for the people of Nunavut. Our mandate recognizes that Nunavut, while having a basic economy in place, remains undeveloped. We need investment in infrastructure, but we also need to educate our people so they can enter the workforce. And we need to develop our natural resources so that everyone can enjoy prosperity. We recognize that too many people are still unemployed and underemployed, and that for too many people, income are too low. Economic development means that building an economy that is able to create more opportunities for employment, entrepreneurship, and investment. It's also an economy that is able to translate human potential in prosperity. Within this context, we recognize that responsible resource development will be the foundation of our future prosperity and success. Factoring in inflation, Nunavut's economy is expected to grow almost 4% this year. It has been the case in recent years. Much of this growth is coming from the mining and mineral exploration. Last year, mineral exploration expenditures reached $215 million, ranking Nunavut 5th in the country. We are also seeking to ensure economic diversification so that our economy is not so dependent on mining and mineral exploration or public sector spending. Nunavut's tourism industry is getting stronger, but I believe there is still much we can learn from Greenland's example. The number of tourists visiting Nunavut and the amount they spend in the territory have both increased in recent years. Cruise ship voyages reached an all-time high last year, with about 30 community visits. Measures are being developed to better regulate the sector and maximize the economic benefits for Nunavut. This summer, with massive cruise ship, Crystal Serenity is bringing tourists to 2 of our communities. The number of passengers on the ship will surpass the number of people in those 2 hamlets. Nunavut's arts and crafts industry generates a significant economic impact. It provides the equivalent of over 1,000 jobs. After years of storage in Yellowknife, more than 8,000 Inuit artifacts have gone to the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and many of these are destined for Gallery's new Inuit Art Center. This is a great opportunity to build interest in the Inuit art and culture, but it will also allow us to sell pieces of artists' work at the gallery. Nunavut is a territory where there are plenty of economic opportunities. For example, the construction industry is benefiting from 4 major projects: the Mary River Iron Ore, the Iqaluit International Airport, the Canadian High Arctic Research Station, and a major public housing project. At the same time, our fisheries industry is rapidly growing. We harvest turbot, shrimp, and Arctic char. Through successful lobbying, Nunavut has gained more control of its fish species, or fish stocks. As the government of Nunavut, Minister of Economic Development and Transportation, I recognize that transportation infrastructure is an integral part of economic development for the peoples of the Arctic. It's simply growth in our economy depends on development of transportation infrastructure. Central to Nunavut's transportation system is the Iqaluit International Airport, the hub for most of air transportation through the territory. We are currently in the midst of redeveloping via a public-private partnership this airport, a development that is proceeding on schedule and on budget. In addition, with the support of the federal government, funding has been provided for the construction of marine facility in Pond Inlet and in Iqaluit. These projects, particularly the creation of a deep water port in Iqaluit, will significantly reduce offloading times for dry cargo, while also cutting fuel offloading times and reducing environmental risk. Infrastructure investments are important. At the same time, in order to realize Nunavut's full economic potential, we must also continue to make investments in the people of Nunavut. The government of Nunavut is doing this through our work on the reduction of poverty, examining social assistance, early childhood education, and skills development. For example, the government of Nunavut, through my department, provides funding to the Kielsen Mine Training Society and to other mine training initiatives, throughout the territory. In recent years, Nunavut has seen a promising increase in the number of high school graduates. The government of Nunavut is working to ensure that more and more Nunavut high school graduates will pursue further education and skills training. We are confident there will be jobs for these graduates. In the next decade, we could see more mines operating in Nunavut. Currently, about 400 Nunavut Mute are employed at Agnico Eagle's Meadowbank mine and in business serving the mining company. With an increasingly skilled local workforce, when the nearby Meladine and Amau gold projects open up it will mean hundreds of new jobs and business opportunities for our residents. Baffin Land's Mary River mine continues to extract iron ore and employ people from across the Arctic and beyond. In addition, in support of economic diversification I spoke about earlier, we recognize the importance of small business in supporting economic development for the people of the Arctic. We need to foster a small business sector that is creative and adaptable. Businesses need to be able to take advantage of opportunities as they arise and be resilient enough to survive economic and commodity cycles or the winding down of individual mines. The government of Nunavut will continue to ensure businesses in the north have the resources they need to grow. We have a range of funding and other programs available to help local businesses start up and expand. In addition, we continue to support our communities through partnerships so they can play a greater role in local economic development. In closing, I would like to say that Nunavut, our land, a place of great opportunity and development. The government of Nunavut is committed to furthering this opportunity and supporting growing economic development for the peoples of the Arctic. I look forward to more in-depth conversation on these issues during our panel discussion. Merci.
Thank you, Minister. Now to our next speaker, Patricia Qujaukitsoq, Minister of Education and Economic Development from Nunavut as well.
Just going to try this. Okay. Ólafur. On behalf of our President, Johannes Lamp, and the Nunavut government, I want to thank the organizers for inviting us to this year's Arctic Circle Greenland Forum. This is my first visit to Greenland, and I'm awe-inspired. It's so beautiful here. Before I get into my formal presentation, I thought it might be useful to provide an overview of our homeland, Nunavut, which means our beautiful land, how our territory was established, and a little bit about our government and how we reached this point in history. For thousands of years, the Labrador Inuit have managed to live from the land and sea. Our attachment to the land, sea, and our unique culture and our language has defined us as a people and continues to guide us as we evolve in a modern society. Guided by the Labrador Inuit Constitution, we envision a future where Labrador Inuit are self-sufficient, practicing our unique way of life, culture, and traditions in healthy Nunavut communities and within sustainable environments. Our journey as a people and as a government has been a long and difficult one. The formation of the Labrador Inuit Association took place in 1973, and its incorporation 2 years later laid the groundwork for us today. From filing our first land claim in 1977 to the start of negotiations over a decade later, through ratification process and the signing of the Labrador Inuit Land Claims Agreement in 2005, we now have a strong government structure that has earned the respect of other many organizations across Canada. Did it switch? We can attribute much of our success to the Land Claims Agreement, which sets out in detail of land ownership, resource sharing, and self-government. Our settlement area totals 72,500 square kilometers of land and 48,690 square kilometers of sea. The agreement provides Labrador Inuit special rights related to traditional land use in this area. Within the settlement area, 15,800 square kilometers is designated as Labrador Inuit lands, or LIL, and is owned by the Labrador Inuit. The agreement also provides for the establishment of the Torngat Mountains National Park, consisting of 9,600 square kilometers of land within Lisa. Our land claim is roughly the size of Ireland. Okay, sorry. So in the red, it's our LIL, our Labrador Inuit lands. The beige is Lisa, Labrador Inuit settlement area, and green is the Torngat Mountains National Park. And this is a photo taken inside the Torngat Mountains National Park. Our government structure, sorry. The Nunavut government was established on December 1st, 2005. It comprised of 18 assembly members and operates at two distinct but connected levels, regional and community, with 5 Inuit community governments. The Nunavut government has responsibilities and rights similar to other governments, such as planning for sustainable economic development, protecting and preserving Labrador Inuit culture and traditions, and implementing health and social programs on behalf of our beneficiaries. Unlike other governments, the Nunavut government is a consensus government. Elections are held every 4 years. The elected officials represent 7,200 beneficiaries of our land claim agreement. Our government is comprised of 7 departments. The Department of Education and Economic Development, in which I am the minister, strives to foster positive climate in an attempt to provide long-term economic stability and sustainability for Nunavut and the beneficiaries of our land claim agreement. We also provide post-secondary education and training to support our people. We have on average 250 students per year that are funded through our programs. This is our assembly building in Hopedale, our legislative capital. It's one of the nicest buildings in all of Labrador. Economic development. With respect to economic development, our goal is to create an economic environment that encourages self-reliance, prosperity, employment, and entrepreneurship. We focus on research, short-term training opportunities, business planning, and community development. We also manage an Inuit business registry, which has 108 Inuit businesses, 20 in Nunavut, and 88 outside our territory in other parts of the province and Canada. While we continue to face many challenges as a young government, particularly with respect to social issues, we have made some significant progress in improving the health and well-being of Labrador Inuit, while at the same time creating employment opportunities. We have converted our isolation, limited capacity, and minimal economic development into assets rather than view them as barriers to economic development. With lessons learned from 30 years of negotiating our land claims agreement and recognizing the opportunities associated with being an Inuit self-government in a resource-rich region with access to the Arctic, we need to leverage our development approach. Partnerships lead to success. This allows us to determine our economic needs and utilize collaborative development to ensure meaningful outcomes. The Labrador Inuit Capital Strategy Trust. We transformed our development corporation from a social enterprise to a business entity in 2010 with the establishment of the Nunavut Group of Companies, NGC. NGC, through the Labrador Inuit Capital Strategy Trust, LICST, operates at arm's length from our government. This intentional division of politics and business allows the trust to make sound business decisions and operate without political interference. The mandate of the trust is to create wealth for Nunavut. The trust reports to our assembly annually. Here is a flow chart of their corporate structure. The blue boxes are 100% Inuit owned by Nunavut Group of Companies. The black brown boxes are joint ventures and partnerships. And Universal Helicopters is represented in the orange box is a limited partnership. The LICSD has mindfully diversed its business lines into 12 businesses, includes fishing, construction, transportation, both air and marine, commercial real estate, and logistics. These companies operate on a majority-owned basis, ensuring capacity building, employment options, and decision-making authority. These companies, which operate primarily in Labrador, with some focus on Newfoundland and Quebec, have the potential to expand their operations further. Projects range from local service operators, ferry service, marine shipping, remote base camp operations, fixed wing and helicopter services, to multi-million-dollar contracts at the Voisey's Bay nickel mine. Partners include national companies and neighboring First Nation Innu bands. NGC is one of our main employers and employs about 300 people. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to skip over. Voisey's Bay is a 6,000 ton per day open mine in northern Labrador. It's near our community of Nain, and we have 45% of the workforce in Voisey's Bay are Inuit, 210 out of 468. We'd like it to be higher. And Voisey's Bay is going underground in the next several years. And this is a shot of Voisey's Bay. Our fishery, the fishery is an integral part of the Labrador Inuit culture and Nunavut's economy. And we have fished inshore, midshore, and offshore for many years. Historically, we fished cod, salmon, and Arctic char, and now we're moving into shrimp and snow crab. And this is a shot of one of our fish plants in Makkovik. And in conclusion, we continue to expand our economic goals. Lessons of Nunavut in economic development is that it's meaningfully important to utilize existing assets as a partner, as a means to ensure capacity building and sustainability. What we learn from the past will shape where we go in the future. The days of domination and colonizations very much eroded our cultural identity, way of life, and stripped us of our natural resources. Those days are over. Economic development in Nunavut must support our people and provide direct benefits to our communities. By doing so, we have learned that we can achieve long-term gains and provide direct benefits to our people. The bottom line, if a company wants to come into Nunavut for resource development, they have to come as a partner with us and hire Nunavut beneficiaries and not bring in their own people. As a government, we are determined to improve the social and economic well-being of our people and our communities, and we want to forge partnerships to reach that goal. Nakamik.
Thank you, Minister. Now to our next speaker, Mr. Jeffrey Kelly, Minister responsible for Native Affairs, Government of Quebec.
Nakarnik, thank you very much. President Grímsson, our Greenland hosts, fellow panelists, distinguished guests. Pour moi, c'est un grand plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui comme représentant du gouvernement du Québec. Notre Premier ministre, M. Couillard, m'a désigné de représenter le Québec à ce forum. There's my gentle reminder that there's also a French perspective on the development of the North, Quebec, of course, being the French-speaking part of Canada, so I'm very proud to be here. Like many other people have mentioned, this is my first trip to Greenland, and a lot of my friends back in Montreal said, wow, going to Greenland, I'd never thought about that, but that's really cool. That's something that's really exciting. And I think many of the other speakers have talked about it today. There is a growing interest in the Arctic. There's a growing interest in the North. I'm very lucky because as Quebec Minister for Native Affairs, I've been able to explore northern Quebec a great deal. But for me to start thinking about Iceland, with due respect, President, it's something I haven't thought about all that much in my life. But this conference, I think, is an occasion for all of us to start thinking about our neighbors. You talked about a neighborhood in the North, President Grímsson, and I like that image very much. And we have examples of it. When I was in Katuaq in Quebec a couple of weeks ago, people are still talking about the Arctic Winter Games that were hosted here in Nuuk in March and apparently were a great success. But I think these are examples that, yes, there's economic development, and I'll get to that in a moment, but there are other bonds that we can continue to develop as well that bring people together. And I think it's very exciting. And to be here with a couple of my colleagues, Robert Sauvé, who's the president of our Northern Development Corporation, La Société de Plan Nord, Christos Syros, a very good friend of mine who's our representative in London, but also to have with us representatives of Nunavut. I see two of my friends from the Makiyavik Corporation, Adami Delil Alaku and Andy Morehouse. Joey Lance is here. Pita Atami is here from Air Inuit. We have a representative from the Regional Health Board from Nunavut as well. So I think we're all here and we have all sorts of experiences to share and to learn about, because there are huge challenges facing all of us. And I think to have a forum where we can talk about those ideas together, where we can look at things like, I drew up a quick list just thinking about it, but one of them, of course, is climate change. And certainly within a Quebec context, the effects of climate change are felt most dramatically in northern Quebec. So I think it is one example where climate change is something that we have to think about. What can we do? There was the great conference in Paris before Christmas that gives challenges to all of our societies on how to come to grips with climate change, because it's our northern residents that are first and foremost involved. There are whole questions of that balance that we've talked about between economic development, resource development, and protection of the environment. There are no easy answers to those questions. You've probably grappled with it in your jurisdictions. We grapple with it in our jurisdiction as well. So what can we learn from what kind of practices can we learn from a conference such as this one today? We've talked about social development. As I say, a representative from our Regional Health Board in Nunavut is here, exchanging best practices with people that he's going to meet. But we all have challenges about what's the best way to provide health care, what's the best way to provide education in northern contexts, respectful of native languages, native traditions. I think this is all part of the challenge that we're facing. I had a very interesting meeting this morning with Knud Christensen, who's responsible for housing here in Greenland. And we have a huge challenge in northern Quebec. Well, how do we deliver housing? We have a very, very young population in northern Quebec. We already have a huge housing shortage, but I'm very fearful of what the housing situation will look like in 2030 if we're not keeping up now, and if half of the population or more is under 25, what will housing look like in our 14 northern villages in 2030 is something I think that we can learn from each other. What experiences have worked, what approaches have worked, what hasn't worked, because I think there's always a place in a conference like this to say, we tried that and that didn't work out very well. So I think there is something we can learn from that kind of experience as well. All of the infrastructure challenges. We've talked about aviation, we've talked about shipping, we've talked about airports, we've talked about ports. There's all sorts of development as well that we can share practices and learn from something today. And so I think maybe the first point I'd like to make is that we all have a great deal to learn from each other today, and I'm looking forward to my 3 days here in Nuuk to listen to your experiences, exchange practices on what we can do in terms of a respectful and a sustainable northern development in our various countries and our various jurisdictions. In Quebec, what I'd like to talk to you about very briefly is our approach to this, which was started in 2010 by the then Premier Jean Charest, who came up with a Plan Nord, a northern plan, which was an idea to do something to, our representative from the ICC, Okalik, talked about it before, as opposed to just having a vision to the next election or to the next 6 months, to really sit down around a table and say, what do we want northern Quebec to look like in the year 2035? And to try to make it as global a vision as possible, so it's not just a question of mining, or it's not just a question of other economic development, or just education. What can we do together comprehensively to imagine what northern Quebec will look like in the year 2035? So it was launched in 2010 with a sort of a second edition. Governments change, as we all, the politicians in the room know that governments change every once in a while. So a new government in 2014 under Philippe Couillard came up with a second version or a second edition. But the idea is to try to get government, the leaders from the various First Nations and Inuit communities, the private sector, non-governmental organizations, environmentalists, all around a big table and say, what will Quebec look like, or what will northern Quebec look like in 2035? So it's a government proposal with government investments, private sector investments. And what was very interesting was the northern leaders, both Inuit and Cree, ran with this idea. So the Cree presented a Cree vision of the Plan Nord in about 2012, and the Inuit did a very, very significant consultation called Parnasumatik, which is be prepared, get ready, something like that. I don't know, you'll help me with the translation. But they went around to all 14 communities across northern Quebec, north of the 55th parallel. So if you're in Greenland, that's fairly southern, I know, but it's pretty north for Quebec, north of the 55th parallel. Went to all the communities and came up with an Inuit vision of what they would like Nunavut to look like in the year 2035. So it was very ambitious, very long, many meetings and communities to come up with their vision. And some of the very strong points that were made in that vision included the whole question of language and culture. I think if there was one message that came out very clearly was the threat to an Inuit identity, if you will, and how important it is in terms of education, in terms of the decisions we make for the future, to make sure that that Inuit language, tradition, traditional activities and cultures are part of our forward thinking. So that was a point that came out from that consultation very clearly. The environment as well, as I mentioned, northern Quebec is where the challenges of climate change, the challenges of building housing and other infrastructure in a pretty hostile climate. There's still lots of snow in Katuaq when we were there yesterday, so it's quite a challenge. It's quite a challenge of bringing everything up from the south. There's a very short shipping season, and most non-perishable goods and most building materials and everything else have to come from the south. So that's a challenge for all of us. How can we do that? How can we do that without creating a cost of living that's beyond, it's already very expensive to live in Kujawak and in the other northern villages, so we're working to try to find ways to keep the cost of living under control for the people who live there. And then, as I say, this enormous preoccupation with the youth of the communities. Quebec, like many Western democracies, have an aging population. I'm a baby boomer, and most of the people who live in Quebec are baby boomers like me who are in their early 60s. So we're more worried about seniors' residences, but up in northern Quebec, it's elementary schools, it's daycare centers. What can we do to prepare tomorrow? So it's a very different demographic pyramid that we're dealing with in northern Quebec. So that's something that's very exciting as well. So with Premier Couillard, we've said all along that all northern development has to be done for and with the people of the north, the Cree, the Naskapi, the Innu, and the Inuit, our three First Nations and our Inuit nation, very important to that future. I heard my bell. As you can see, I love to talk about this because northern Quebec, my first trip to there was 1991, so it gives me a nice perspective. I've seen Kujawak in particular evolve over the last 25 years, but I promised people back at the Home Office, my last 30 seconds will be a pitch The fourth forum in this series will be held in Quebec City, December 11, 12, and 13. The Christmas trees will all be decorated. There'll be lights everywhere. I'd like to be able to promise you snow, but climate change is even affecting Quebec City, so I can't guarantee you snow on the 13th of December. But there will be an important conference like this forum here. We'll be talking about social and economic development. We'll be talking about climate change. I think Prince Albert of Monaco is coming to do an important session. So mark that down in your calendars, but I would really enjoy if as many of you as possible can come and join us in Quebec City, get ready for Christmas under the bright lights on the St. Lawrence River. And sur that, thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Minister Kelly. We have a last speaker, but there's an option to ask questions afterwards, so please prepare some questions. Our last speaker is Ólafur Konradsdóttir. She's a member of Parliament of Iceland, and also Vice President of the West Nordic Council. Thank you.
The President of the Greenlandic Parliament, the President of Iceland, dear Arctic friends. I'm so honored to be here with you all today, and it's so exciting to be giving the best spot of today. That is to give the last speech before the first coffee break. A great number of political decisions are now being taken at the international level. Many of these decisions have impacts for the people who live in the Arctic. The global governance is now not only in the hands of governments, but also executives, international organizations, corporations, and non-governmental organizations, to name a few. National parliaments and other publicly elected bodies appear more as outsiders or even as passive bystanders. The global democratic deficit is growing even larger, and national parliaments risk becoming the main losers in global decision-making. Nobody likes to be a loser, and that's why I'm here. We in the West Nordic Council, that is, the parliaments in Iceland, Faroe Islands, and Greenland, we are members of the West Nordic Council. And we do believe that parliamentarians should be interested in Arctic affairs, and they should participate in the debate about the Arctic. I've been lucky enough to be able to participate in all the Arctic Circle assemblies in Reykjavik. And I was also in the forum in Alaska last year, but I missed out in Singapore. Sorry about that, Singapore. But at the first Arctic Circle assembly in Iceland, I do believe there were only 3 parliamentarians from Iceland present. And my president discussed this with me, and we were not happy about that. And that is why we in the West Nordic Council decided to focus a little bit on why the elected people of the Arctic countries do not participate in a higher level in those meetings. Last year, we had a meeting and invited everyone who was attending the meeting in Reykjavik to a lunch. And we are trying to establish the Arctic Parliamentary Network. And we hope to see more participants in the future. And we have a meeting tomorrow at lunch. And we hope to see the ones that are elected to join us at that meeting. We do represent the people living in the Arctic, and it is our duty to participate. We in the West Nordic Council, we have a few weapons. We adopt resolutions that are submitted directly to the 3 national parliaments for approval and then implemented by the appropriate ministers in the governments of the 3 countries. In the last year, the Council has put great efforts in mapping out where the interests of the West Nordic countries go together on Arctic affairs, and adopted resolutions accordingly with an emphasis on 4 issues: free trade, transport, the ocean and its resources, and the Arctic. All of these issues are closely connected, and they are all relate to the uniqueness of the region with respect to its location. Increasing trade between the 3 countries is essential to ensure economic growth in the region as a whole. And there is a great potential in this regard. Reliable transport is also vital. We need to ensure effective transport links within the West Nordic region to the benefit of all 3 countries. We also have common interest when it comes to fisheries, including common fish stocks. We will never agree on everything, but we can work more closely together. As I said earlier, we have been active participants in the Arctic Circle assemblies since 2014. And last January, the Council, in fact, became an official partner of the Arctic Circle, providing us with many opportunities for further cooperation. At last year's assembly, the Council hosted a special meeting, as I told you earlier, for elected representatives in the assembly, and we do hope to see more of you in the future. But I need your help, because I need you all, when you go home and meet your MPs and all the parliamentarians, to tell them about our meetings and how important it is that the people who live in the Arctic have their politicians in those meetings, networking for the areas. We also, in the West Nordic Council, we do know that 30 out of 32 observators through the Arctic Council, only 1 is parliamentary organization. And this is one of the main reasons the parliamentary organization, the West Nordic Council, is applying for observator status in the Arctic Council to decrease the obvious democratic deficit in the Arctic governance. And we do hope that we will get a yes to a positive response to our application. To conclude, I believe it to be the West Nordic countries' duty, as the only countries in the world where 100% of the population lives in the Arctic, to draw attention to the rights of the population to influence the region's development. It should not only be government officials, international organizations and businesses that lead the way, but the people living in the area. Nationally elected representatives of Arctic states are those responsible for protecting the rights of the region's inhabitants. In addition to debating and exchanging information on Arctic issues, elected representatives in the region can also, as the case of the West Nordic Council proves, have a direct impact on decision-making on Arctic affairs at the governmental level. Now that national governments are not simply losing autonomy in a globalized world, but sharing the powers with numerous self-serving parties, greater democratic influence on Arctic affairs is simply crucial. At last, I want to be a little selfish, and thank on behalf of us from Iceland, our president, who is now finishing his 5th term as president of Iceland, for everything he has done for us, especially regarding Arctic matters. He has put that topic on the map, and traveling with the president to other countries, for example, at the forum in Alaska, shows us that a small country has a strong voice, and together we can do anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. Let me give a correction first, Monica. I have received a corrected title on you, and it's Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, Minister responsible for suicide prevention for the government of Nunavut. I apologize for the confusion before. Now the floor is open for questions. And we welcome questions and not speeches, if that's possible. So be precise and concise in your wording so we can have an open discussion with the assets sitting on the stage today. There should be mics somewhere if there's a question. Okay, maybe I can open the, okay, over here. I missed it.
I have a question. I have a question for our representative from Nunavut. I saw that one of the principles on how you utilize your resources was based on the wisdom or the wise use of the resources. How do you prioritize the use of the various riches and resources that is available in Nunavut? Is there any guidelines on your priorities, and what are they based on? Thank you.
That's a very big question, and Nunavut is rich in resources, especially in the mineral sector and mining sector, but it's also rich in culture, in the arts and crafts sector, as well as the tourism. So we have different pillars of economic development that we could focus on, and prioritizing in those different sectors is key to development. So we have the tourism, we develop strategies such as the tourism strategy that we have in place to emphasize economic development in that sector. We have different strategies that have been developed as well, called Sanauwait, which is for the arts and crafts center, arts and crafts sector rather. And we also have a mining strategy called Pagnautit. So those are the documents that we look to in terms of developing. I hope that have answered your question. In developing those strategies, we include the people of Nunavut through community consultations and consultations with the sector in developing those strategies. Thank you.
This one? Well, thank you. First an observation and then a question. It was really interesting to hear my colleague panelists commenting on the need of infrastructure investments in some areas. And it strikes me that there seems to be some kind of negative correlation between the needs of investment and the level of self-determination. Where the level of self-determination is high, it's also a big need for investment in infrastructure. But in the Sami areas, we have rather good infrastructure when it comes to roads, when it comes to housing, when it comes to transportation. But our level of self-determination when it comes to natural resources is lower. So we are kind of paying the price for the good infrastructure with a lower level of self-determination because our areas are accessible and we are in minority. Just an observation, I would be happy if any of the other panelists could comment on that. And then I have a question to Greenland, because you enjoy quite a high level of self-determination when it comes to industrial development, extraction of natural resources. And I have, from Sapmi, been trying to follow the discourse in Greenland. What I think is kind of challenging and or would be challenging for us as a Sami parliament is when the day comes when we really get a say in if or where there is to be mineral development in the Sami areas. How would we involve right holders, local communities? Because it's we expect that of the national government, the state of Norway, that they should involve us, that they should involve stakeholders. But how do you, as an indigenous state, involve the local communities and the stakeholders in your decisions on where and what to extract of natural resources? I would be really glad if you could tell us about that.
I'm speaking Greenlandic. Kalaallit nunatsinni pingaartittoruissuarput inuiaqatittaakuutinnissaat aammalu akissuteqaatini aammalu assigingitsutigut suleriutsimi akuutinnissaan. You have sound? Kanaali qassimippat? Channel 3. Ready? Assigingitsunik iliuseqartoqartarpoq paasititsiniaalluni assersuutigallugu aatitassarsiorneq uangaam paarisarivara aatitassarsiortoqarsatillugu suliffiit imaluunniit ingerlatitseqatigiiffiit pisussaaffeqarput tusarniaanermi innuttaasut kalaallunatsinni tusarniassallugit assigingitsunik allanik immikkoortortaqarfinni imaluunniit suliffeqar qanor pisortaqarfinni naalakkersuisuqarfinniam tusarniaasoqartarpo peqatigiiffiit kattuffiillu pingaartineqartoruissuusarpu tusaassallugit taannaluamma pingaaruteqarluinnarp inatsisiliussalluni imaluunniit nutartiterissalluni massakkut aatitassarsiorni eqqarsaatigalugu tusarniaasarpugut aammalu ingerlatitseqatigiffiit tassani pisussaaffeqarlutik tusarniaanissamut aammalu uagut naalakkersuisuningaanniik inatsisiliagut tassani sinaakkusersuinikuullutik aalisarneru iluani assersuutigaluam taamannak peqatigiiffiit imaluunni kattuffiit aamma tusarniarneqartarput. I hope you understand me. Tässä.
I think we're ready for the next question up here first, at the back of the hall. Can you present yourself first as well? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bjørn Poppel. I'm affiliated with the Eegeesiak University of Greenland, and my question was related to among other things, what Randi Vestergaard said in her presentation. I didn't hear the answer, so I might ask you to repeat something that you said earlier. The title of this session is Economic Development for the Peoples of the Arctic, and many of you have stressed that it's also with the peoples of the Arctic. From what you said, Randi, it seemed like if democracy was actually the problem, naming minority groups, interest groups, and case stories by media as the main reason for not having reforms implemented. My question goes a little further, and it's not only to you, but also to the others. In the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights, it stated the principle of free, prior, and formal consent in relation, for instance, to developing mining activities. So I would like just a few sentences from each of you about the experience you have with these kinds of activities, and especially in Greenland, what the actual plans are to have this free, prior and formal consent implemented. Thank you.
Anybody want to go first, or do you want to focus on a certain part of the question or repeat? I think you have to elaborate or make it more precise because the responses are.
Well, I can start.
Okay, sure.
If you'd like.
Okay.
Just the framework of the relationship between the Canadian government, the Quebec government, and the Cree and Inuit people were set out in 1975 in a document called the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement, which is the first modern treaty in Canadian history between First Nations and Inuit people and the governments. In that, there are a number of mechanisms that, including environmental review, where there are bodies that include both Inuit representatives and Quebec representatives, federal government representatives, to go over these kind of projects. As you know, the Prime Minister of Canada was at the Minister of Indigenous Affairs for Canada was at the United Nations last week, and she committed the new federal government to continue to develop the concept of a free and prior consent to projects. It's something that we continue to work on with the First Nations, but the goal always is to hit that right balance between a form of economic development, to get back to your question, but as a tool to promote social justice and social development. Providing education, building infrastructure is something that costs money, but we want to make sure as much as possible that the revenues generated from those projects stays in the region. I would point to the success of Air Inuit. I know the President, Pita Atami, will be addressing you tomorrow, but if there's more economic activity in Nunavut, it's good news for Air Inuit. It's something that and with whether it's mines, there's a large nickel mine in Raglan in northern Quebec, where over the years we've worked very hard in terms of providing training and other opportunities to increase the Inuit workforce in that project. I think it's a little bit more than 20% right now, which is still too low. We also hope that when these projects go forward, they will go forward with an element of buy local and make sure that the suppliers for those projects, and wherever possible, are in the region. So we try to use them as motors for economic development in the same way that the Hydro-Quebec, which is the large public utility which has developed hydroelectricity in Quebec, in many of their contracts has a minimum set aside for the benefits for the region, which include for the First Nation or Inuit people. So these are different examples we try to use to balance social development and social justice with economic development. But when it comes to, as I say, free and prior consent, this is something that with the new involvement and endorsement by the federal government is something we will continue to work on, that we can design and develop these projects working together with our Inuit partners.
I'll just be brief. Nunavut was created in 1999, and we have what's called the Land Claims Agreement, and that there are officials here from the Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, just recognizing the President, Kathy Tautungi. This agreement is what the Nunavut government also utilizes to implement, as an example, under it, Article 24, and that is the Nunavut Naminahaftune Iqayokti policy that deals with procurement. It's a policy for procurement for contracting within the Nunavut settlement area, and the when the government does tenders for construction or other projects within Nunavut, then that article, that policy has to fall in place, where we just recently changed it, and the new policy will be in effect April 1, 2017. In the new policy, it states a 25% bid adjustment for Inuit firms, and that means that there's a 15% opportunity for Inuit ownership companies to have a bid preference of up to 15%. They go by 5% increments, and that 5% starts with, if you're a registered Inuit-owned company, you get a 5% preference. If you're another, you get another 5% if you're a 76% or more Inuit ownership, and 100% Inuit ownership, yet again another 5%. So you have an opportunity to have a bid preference of up to 15% if you're Inuit ownership. The other two, the other two that make up the 25%, the 5% is for the Nunavut-based businesses, which are the companies that are registered with the Nunavut government. So the 15% I was talking about are registered Inuit companies that are registered with the Inuit Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, which is the organization that falls with the Land Claims Agreement, and they're the holders of those companies. And the final 5% is for local companies. So it's 25%. Right now it's 777. It's 21%, and the 7% is for all, just the combined Inuit, local, and Nunavut businesses. So now that is gone up to 25%, and it starts in April 1. As for the mining companies, we also have what's called regional Inuit associations that fall within the Nunavut settlement area in the three regions that are part of Nunavut, which is Katuaq Inuit Association, the Katuaq Inuit Association, and the Katuaq Inuit Association. So those companies are able to do what's called an agreement with the companies, and in that agreement they are able to have a preference of Inuit labor. So if I take the mining company that I spoke about earlier with about 400 Inuit workers, there is still a lot of leakage that goes to the south, unfortunately, because we are still not up to the skilled labor force that we would like to be at, where the labor stays within Nunavut. There's still lots of fly-in of certain types of people that are hired that are required for those companies, and at this time there's still a lot of leakage. But we do have that Inuit Training Society where we are trying to assist more training for individuals that can be hired by those companies. And those companies right now, the mining training, I can give you one example of recent graduates of skilled labor, such as those that can do the red seal. Right now, for those individuals, there were a few that are from Nunavut that are local Inuit that have just recently graduated. So now those companies can hire those individuals from Nunavut. Those are just a few examples. Going on too long.
Yeah. If you can make it short, please. We've got 2 more questions on the floor. So, no, just make it briefly. Thank you.
Is this working?
I hope so.
Okay. In our region, with the Voisey's Bay development, which is the largest development in our region, we signed an impacts and benefit agreement with the company, and in that agreement they have to hire as much as possible Inuit labor, and they also have to do procurement through an Inuit or Inu registered company. So that's why we have our registry. So there's a preference for Inuit or Inu companies. And also what we found with the Voisey's Bay project is some of our people started in low-level jobs, maybe cleaning, maybe stuff like that, but they moved up and became supervisors and managers, so that's very positive. We also received money from the federal government to do training for that project, and we're hoping to also receive money from the federal government as well as with ourselves and the Inuit for underground training development so we can get more employment in the Voisey's Bay project.
Thank you. I will have to encourage the people who have questions to seek out the panel members because we don't have time for it. I'm sorry. Thank you very much to all speakers.
Taima.
I'm sorry.
Well, thank you very much for this session. Thank you. There's not time for any more this session, so sorry. We have the part of this program now where we can stretch our legs. It's been 2 long hours or more. And please, there are some coffee and tea outside. And please be back for the next section.